For many years, it looked like the Budokai Tenkaichi series had been shelved, which was not uncommon for Dragon Ball games, as there have been many different genres and iterations of the franchise that have gone the way of the dodo. But what made the Budokai Tenkaichi series different? Well, nothing really. People just really like it, and make no secret about wanting the series to continue. Okay, so there is more of a reason as to why a sequel to the Tenkaichi series makes a lot of sense, and it's not just because people want it, but also because at its core, the Budokai Tenkaichi series' main draw was the extensive character roster. With Dragon Ball Super, Heroes, and all of these new aspects added to the series after 2007, continuing this series makes so much more sense than bringing back something like the Budokai series, even though I would really love that. A woman can dream. This brings us to early 2003. No, it doesn't. Not that long ago. This brings us to early 2023 with the reveal of the new entry into the Budokai Tenkaichi series. Finally, over 15 years later, we were getting a direct sequel to Tenkaichi 3, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 4. Well, that is what everyone was referring to it as, until months later the actual name was unveiled as Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, reclaiming its Japanese moniker of the Sparking series. So if this is Sparking Zero, then what is Tenkaichi 4? Well, Tenkaichi 4 is not an official entry into the series, but a high quality mod created by Team BT4 that predates Sparking Zero by a few years. The reason why this mod is so highly regarded within the wider community is that it not only adds more characters to the roster, but also builds upon the Tenkaichi 3 formula with new movesets, game modes and story content, while also maintaining the spirit and style of the original trilogy.
Well, what would you call them? A pod of Namekians? A pride?
A cornucopia. What do you call a group of humans?
An infestation.
The main draw of any Tenkaichi game is the character roster, and Tenkaichi 4 is no exception. For this video, I played through the Beta 13 version, which has 217 characters. At least, I'm pretty sure that's how many. I counted 5 times, and 3 of the 5 times, I counted 217. One time I counted 218 and then another time was 216, but I think I was just psyching myself out while counting, so I'm just going to go with there are 217 characters. That is 54 more than in Tenkaichi 3 and even more than it is in the base version of Sparking Zero. And remember, this game is free, just putting it out there. Keep that in the back of your mind. Most of this roster expansion has come from the inclusion of Dragon Ball Super characters and transformations, but there has also been some additions from the other eras of the franchise, such as some more movie characters, as well as a few more GT characters. It goes without saying that Tenkaichi 4 has the most comprehensive character roster in the entire series, so far. But not all characters are created equal, like the giant Namekians. If you have watched any of my other Tenkaichi 3 videos, you already know that I hate fighting as and against giant characters, and just having giant versions of characters didn't really spur much enthusiasm for the character type. But that is one of the advantages of having such a huge roster. There is so much variety that even if there are some characters you just don't jive with at all, there are plenty of others for you to try out. All of the new characters have their own movesets. Though there is a lot of reusing of attacks, there are a lot of new ones added to the game, like a ton of new Blast 2s and Ultimate attacks to go along with the new and returning characters. Some of the returning characters' movesets have been altered. For example, Super Saiyan 2 Mid Goku has one of his blast moves changed, as well as a completely different Ultimate attack. I'm not sure if the changes make the characters better or worse, but this does mean that there may be characters that you didn't really like in the third game that you might like in this one. Of course, this does also work in reverse. For instance, they changed Android 17's barrier move to cost 2 stocks instead of just 1. This does make it more fair when you consider that Super 17's barrier costs 2, and so did Future Gohan's. I am a bit sad about it. I'll get over it though. But actually, Future Gohan's barrier has been changed to only cost 1 now, which makes me very happy. There are a bunch of other changes I noticed, but none really bothered me. But I'm not a pro player or anything, so just take that with a grain of salt. With all of these new characters, there is of course a whole lot of new costumes added. There are now a lot more references to the manga, with Piccolo getting his manga colors, which I have always preferred to the anime, as well as Kid Goku getting his outfit he wore when training with Krillin and Master Roshi for the first time. They have now given Kid Gohan a tail, which is kind of weird that the series has always left this out considering how much they reference him transforming into a great ape, yet they hardly ever depict him with a tail. Also yes, Kid Gohan can actually turn into a grape ape in this game. To a grape ape? To a grape ape. To a what? A great ape. Which I don't think was in the third game. I can't actually remember. There are not only references to the older Dragon Ball stuff, but also the newer stuff too. Adult Gohan has outfits that even change his hair to represent what he looked like in the Super era, even his superhero hairdo. There are even costumes that make the characters look like completely different characters. But I could just go on and on and on and on about this topic. But in short, there is a lot here to enjoy. And they also make a small change to the character select that makes picking the costume you want so much easier. In Tenkaichi 3, a costume was just given a number, and you just had to remember what the number of the costume you wanted was, as there is no preview or anything. However, the modders made such a simple change to the system that makes me wonder why it wasn't like this in the first place. And that is they actually give descriptive names to the costumes rather than just the number. No need to modify the character portraits to give a preview to each costume, just a simple description. It just makes so much sense. And speaking of character portraits, many have been changed for the better. Some of the portraits in 3 just look off, and these new ones look much better in my opinion, and they fit in perfectly with the game's art style. Even the menus have been given a facelift and they all look amazing. Navigating through the menus feels smooth, and they've managed to balance style with functionality, so it's both easy to use and nice to look at. Now when it comes to the in-game graphics, Tenkaichi 4 sticks with the same cel shaded style as Tenkaichi 3, and honestly, it still looks fantastic. The cel shading is vivid and sharp, capturing the energy and spirit of the Dragon Ball anime perfectly. Key attacks are bright and explosive, with stunning auras surrounding the characters. The models have that same sharpness to them, but you can tell there have been some subtle updates here and there that make a noticeable difference. In fact, some of the small tweaks they have made to some of the models actually make them look better, especially the hair. A lot of the hair looks better. And as you all know, this is very important in any Dragon Ball product, as the franchise is all about the hair. Given this is a mod being played on an emulator, there were a few graphical issues, such as the background flickering a bit, but this is a common issue when playing the Tenkaichi series in widescreen, which is one of the reasons why I never play these games in widescreen. But the mod has significantly reduced this issue, and I didn't really notice it. Oddly enough, the section I had the most issues with was the credits. They flickered quite a bit. I guess the game didn't want to give the developers proper credit. But just who are the developers? Team BT4 is a dedicated group of modders and creators. This team has become well known for their work on PS2 games, particularly the Budokai Tenkaichi 4 mod. While this project has earned them significant recognition, their passion extends far beyond a single game, as they continually develop mods and content for various other titles. It is amazing what the team has managed to accomplish, and if you'd like to try out Tenkaichi 4 for yourself, I have left the link to their website in the description.
Vegeta!
What?
I can fly.
Yes, Nappa, yes you can.
Overall, the gameplay mechanics of Tenkaichi 4 are pretty much the same as Tenkaichi 3. You'll still have your rush and strike attacks, and the execution of these moves within a combo varies depending on the character you're using, allowing for a diverse range of techniques and strategies. The momentum-based combat, a hallmark of the Tenkaichi series, remains intact, making it essential to understand each character's charge time and attack flow to maximize their effectiveness in battle. The iconic dragon dashes, vanishing techniques, and Z counters also make their return, ensuring that combat retains its high-octane, fast-paced energy. Mastering these mechanics is crucial, as they play a significant role in stringing together extended combos and dealing massive damage to your opponents. Although I do feel like Z counters and vanishing moves have gotten a bit easier, or maybe I've just gotten better. I did play Tenkaichi 3 for 100 days in a row, so anything is possible. But honestly, I do feel like the timing is a bit more forgiving. With its gameplay being so similar, not only shares almost all of Tenkaichi 3's strengths, but also its weaknesses. So if you are not a fan of Tenkaichi 3's gameplay, then this game is not going to do anything to change your mind. Aside from the new movesets and the attacks that characters have, there wasn't that much of a difference I noticed in the gameplay. apart from one, and that was to have to do with the max power mechanic. In Tenkaichi 3, when certain characters entered max power mode, they are able to teleport at will, but this was for only more powerful characters and transformations. I think it was for any character that was like Super Saiyan 3 power level or above, something like that. The game was actually really unclear about that aspect. Thankfully in Tenkaichi 4, everyone can do it now. The fact that everyone can teleport at will now is a great change, as the way it was before, it just made more powerful characters even more powerful. It was basically the equivalent of winning more, which is kind of pointless. This change feels more balanced, even though it doesn't really level the playing field for weaker characters. It just makes it seem more fair. I'm sure that there are a couple of more subtle changes that I didn't pick up on, and more skilled players will probably notice them. But from a more casual player's perspective, the transition from Tenkaichi 3 to 4 was very straightforward. It's clear that Tenkaichi 4 is not here to reinvent the wheel, but to polish it, providing a smoother, more refined experience that continues to honour the spirit of the original.
I can't go through life only knowing the same thing day in, day out.
Oh, there it is! After 15 years, I just don't excite you anymore, is that it?
Tenkaichi 4 does have its very own story mode. Sort of. Dragon History makes a return, and it has many of the stages present in Tenkaichi 3, but now has a Dragon Ball Super Saga added. However, this isn't all that sets this version of Dragon History apart from the third entry. There are also a few other subtle changes in the stages that help to bring them even closer to the source material. Near the beginning of the game during the Nappa vs Tien fight, Tien's model has been modified to have his forearm chopped off, which looks badass, and his animations work surprisingly well with the missing limb, although sometimes he is hitting with the tip of his stump, which can't feel good. Or maybe it does. A lot of the arenas that the fights take place on have been changed, either with new ones exclusive to Tenkaichi 4, or ones taken from a different Tenkaichi game. For example, for the final fight against Frieza, there is a completely new Namek stage that will even transition to the destroyed Namek stage partway through the fight. There is also the fight against Cell Juniors and Cell himself that has the arena completely destroyed. These new arenas actually do wonders for the story, as it makes the events easier to follow. While playing through Dragon History, I was interested to see if they changed the structure of the story fights by allowing you to end the fights early if you use the win condition attack early, like when the game prompts you to use a character's ultimate, but they didn't, and I honestly wasn't really expecting them to, as it probably would make the fights way too easy. They did add a new loser screen at the end of failed battles though. It has Bardock on it because he's a loser, apparently, although I always thought that Bardock was supposed to be a scientist.
Your father was an average fighter, Kakarot, but he was a brilliant scientist.
If you're under 25, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. There are also some different fanfares as well. In fact, there's a bunch of additional music taken from many different Dragon Ball games, including the beautifully plagiarized music of the Budokai series. These are the most extravagant changes you will notice with the story mode until you hit the end of the Buu Saga, where there is an entirely new level added. It is the fight that takes place at the very end of Dragon Ball Z, where Goku faces off against Oob at the World Martial Arts Tournament. And this fight was really hard for some reason, like way harder than the ones that came before and after. Maybe it's just me sucking, but this was the only fight in the entire story mode that gave me this much trouble.
Well, if it's a level beyond Super Saiyan,
Then he must be a super duper Saiyan.
Once you've completed the Majin Buu Saga, the Dragon Ball Super Saga will become available. As the name suggests, it is a saga dedicated to the Dragon Ball Super arc. All the battles are completely new to Tenkaichi 4 and are quite impressive, as they all feature fully voice acted cutscenes and completely new characters. The first fight in the Super Saga is either based off the Battle of the Gods movie or the God of Destruction Bearer Saga. I'm guessing it's based off the latter, as usually the movie fights are placed in the special saga. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, as the story is basically the same. And that is the approach of the storytelling in these new scenarios. They follow the same formula as Tenkaichi 3, with it being a very broad stroke approach when it comes to the storytelling. There will be some narrative text before fights that give you just enough context to get the gist of what each fight is about, but not enough to where you would be able to follow with much understanding if you didn't have a fair idea of the story beforehand. And this isn't just me singling out the mod, as most Dragon Ball games end up being like this when it comes to the story. The biggest question I had when diving into these new story missions was, are they as good as the ones in Tenkaichi 3? And after playing through the entirety of the story mode, I have come to the conclusion that the answer is no. One of the major issues with these new story missions is the pacing. During fights, there will be points in which you will reach a certain threshold that will trigger either a prompt to appear that you can activate, or a cutscene will automatically start playing. Tenkaichi 3 had a pretty good balance between these two aspects. However, in some of these new missions, the automatic cutscenes were far too frequent, to the point that it feels like you're constantly being interrupted and the flow of battle just stops in its tracks. In the first fight against Barris, there are 3 beam struggles that occur, and these are not prompts that you can skip or just activate when you're ready. These all come after cutscenes that will start automatically. They will even interrupt attacks. It just ruins the pacing of the fight, and the ratio of gameplay and cutscenes feels a bit off. I really do think that some of these scenes should have either been optional prompts or just removed entirely, because most of us playing this already know how powerful Barris is, and we don't really need 5 cutscenes telling us this. I will say though that this pacing issue does get a lot better as the game goes on, and the first couple of Dragon Ball Super stages are the worst offenders for this. This over-eager usage of cutscenes isn't the only issue with them, and this next point probably has a lot to do with how these cutscenes and dialogue lines were actually created. All of the voice lines are taken from other sources like the anime. This means there is a limitation as to how scenes can be structured, and I think this is one of the main reasons as to why some of the cutscenes end up feeling very disjointed. Because the dialogue is ripped from other sources, there are also some distorted sounds that can be heard where the background music and other sounds have been removed.
Commence with the main course. What, you vile bastard!
But with the in-game sounds and music overlaid, it's not that noticeable most of the time, and is honestly really well done considering what they had to work with. And it was really awesome that they went to the effort of having all these voice lines. I honestly wouldn't have minded it if it was just text only for the cutscenes, as that is perfectly serviceable when you don't have access to all the voice talent. This workaround with using lines from the films and anime is so clever, and even though it is not perfect and does have its limitations, you cannot deny that it really does elevate the presentation of the entire package. A wall to overcome was my favourite stage in the Super Saga. The pacing of the fight was excellent. The cutscenes came in at just the right moments without being too long. The flow of the fight was maintained throughout while still achieving great cinematic feel. It's fantastic. The Black Goku arc was also quite well paced as well, but this stage in particular was a standout. Actually, the first fight with Jiren was also really good. I know it's weird to say that one of the most forgettable characters has one of the best fights. Is that a controversial take that Jiren is the most blandest character in Dragon Ball? He's so boring. Tenkaichi 4 does still allow you to ignore certain prompts and end fights in an alternate way, though this method has a bit of the opposite effect to those found in the Tenkaichi 3 stages. What I mean by this is in Tenkaichi 3, ending a fight early or getting an alternate ending was usually a more challenging way to beat a fight, as many prompts would give you an upper hand during battle. This is pretty much the opposite in the Dragon Ball Super Saga. Ignoring the prompts not only made the fights easier to win, but also made them end a lot faster too. For instance, if you ignore the prompts during the Resurrection F stage, you're able to beat the stage before any of the characters even transform, meaning you can unlock Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan fucking Blue, whatever that's called, and Golden Frieza without actually achieving these forms. I do like being able to complete fights in different ways, but these don't feel very satisfying because it skips so much of the content without providing an extra challenge as compensation. Once I realized that skipping prompts could potentially skip huge chunks of the game, I made sure that I hit them as soon as I saw them. The Super Saga is definitely the largest addition to the story mode by far, but there is still some more content that the developers added into the other sagas.
If he's a super duper Saiyan, then I shall find a way to become a super D-duper Saiyan.
The special saga has been stripped down quite a bit. The majority of the levels are now gone for some reason. My guess is that there is only a set amount of level slots that the game allows, and they remove some of the special saga to create room for the super saga. But that is just a wild guess, and while I did enjoy some of the fights in the special saga, I am kind of glad that the fights against the giant characters are now gone. If you watch my 100 days of playing Tenkaichi 3 video, you will already know how much I dislike those fights. Even though the special saga is a lot shorter this time around, there are some new levels for you to enjoy. The first one is a recreation of the History of Trunks OVA. I absolutely love this OVA. but to be honest, this stage was a little underwhelming. You play out future Gohan's final fight against the androids, and he even has his arm missing. Something that this game does different to 3 is there are fights where you will be KO'd, but it still counts as clearing the stage. Normally in Tenkaichi 3, when you see the KO pop up, this means you failed, even if canonically the character lost in the fight, or something similar. This is one of these fights. Both future Gohan and Trunks end up failing at the end, but it still counts as a stage clear. Another change that this game makes is the way you unlock some characters. In this case, after beating this segment, we unlock future Gohan, whereas in 3, you would have to wish for him from Shenron. I really like that you can unlock so many characters just by simply playing through the story mode. Alternatively, there is a cheat code that Team BT4 provides that can be used to unlock everything, but I find it way more fun just to unlock stuff myself. I mean, I'm playing through the game anyway. The Dragon Ball Z Broly fights have been replaced with the Dragon Ball Super Broly fight, and honestly is one of the best battles in the entire game. This fight is packed with multiple segments, each more intense than the last, and it's an absolute blast to play through. It's definitely one of the highlights of the story mode, far surpassing any of the Broly encounters in Tenkaichi 3. They even went the extra mile by creating an entirely new stage specifically for this battle, adding to the overall feel of the fight. I thought that there was more added to the Janemba fight because you unlock Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta by beating it, but I'm pretty sure there isn't. I tried winning early and nothing happened. I don't know why this fight unlocks Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta, because you don't even use this form during this fight. At least I couldn't figure out how to do it.
Can't you just turn into Super Saiyan 4 on your own by now?
Shut up! I could ask the same question of you right now, so don't get on me, you little runt!
The Super 17 arc in the GT stage is much more accurate to the anime. You start the fight as GT Vegeta, and Android 18 actually participates in the fight this time around, and I get that GT Vegeta wasn't in Tenkaichi 3, so that part of the fight couldn't be added, but I have no idea why Android 18 was never in it. The Tenkaichi 4 version of this fight makes so much more sense. Unfortunately, there's still no moustache GT Vegeta though. 0 out of 10. The battle with Nova Shenron has also been greatly expanded upon, as ice actually appears and the conflict between the two dragons is properly conveyed. This was pretty much skipped entirely in Tenkaichi 3 and is way more faithful to the source material, to the point that it makes the original just seem lazy in comparison. I really think the decision to expand more on the GT saga makes so much sense, as it is often shortchanged when it comes to story representation in the games. Admittedly, GT's story isn't that great, but it is something different, and you know, some of the fights just lend themselves better to a video game.
What do I care about seeing your dirty old fanny?
It's not dirty, you rude little boy!
The final saga is ironically the Dragon Ball saga. And yes, that means the What If saga is no longer here. Usually I would be sad about this, but considering how expansive the Super saga is and all of these extra details being added, it's hard to complain, even for me. And you know how I love complaining. That's my whole life. The Dragon Ball saga is largely the same, except the first fight in the saga is completely different. Instead of the fight being Goku vs Nam at the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai, it is the first encounter the group has with Yamcha when he was still a bandit. The fight is nothing special, but at least we get to see Yamcha show off his awesome alternate outfit. Tenkaichi 3 has so many different outfits that go pretty much unused in the story mode, which is a shame because some of them are pretty cool. And that is about it when it comes to the story mode. I'm certain that I missed a few details, but I at least covered the more major changes. Since this is a mod of Tenkaichi 3, it sticks fairly close to that game's formula. So if you don't like that game's story mode, then you aren't going to find much to enjoy about this one. And that sentiment goes for pretty much everything else in Tenkaichi 4. For some this might be a huge downside, but for others, such as myself, this is what I actually really appreciate about this mod. It's just more of what I loved about 3.
So, we having a party?
Must be, because you're late.
Like I was just saying, like the story mode, many of the other modes are very similar to the original. Ultimate Battle mode has been changed to the Time Nest, but even though it has had a complete visual overhaul, the core of it remains largely the same. The Time Nest has 4 different game modes, each tied to the concept of being a time patroller from the Xenoverse series. Or maybe it's based on Dragon Ball Heroes. I'm going to be honest, I've tried several times to watch through Heroes, and I just couldn't get through it. First up, there's Hero mode, which is just the reskin of Sim Dragon, which means that it sucks, and I really don't like this mode. You have 10 days to get ready for a fight. In those 10 days you can choose between training to boost your stats, resting to recover health, or exploring. Each choice comes with trade-offs. Train too much and you might not be healthy enough for the battle. Rest too much and you'll miss out on the stat boost. And at the end of the days, you'll face an opponent with stats you've earned during that period. Just like in Sim Dragon, you'll need to play hero mode in order to buy timeless scrolls that unlock parallel quests. Parallel quests are fights against pre-made teams that you have to take down. It's just mission 100. I really love mission 100 and it's awesome that they've just added more missions for you to do. Sparking Zero really needs a mode like this. Just saying. Next we have side missions, which is just Tenkaichi 3 survival mode but with different themes. Then there are the challenges, the most unique mode added to Tenkaichi 4. Well, at least when compared to Tenkaichi 3, as there are similar modes in the other entries in the series. This is a mode designed to rank you up as your selected fighter. In this mode you fight through 100 ranks, facing increasingly tougher opponents. The mode also includes Ultimate Battle Z, where you can face off against some truly powerful teams and aim for a high score. It's very similar to survival, but the opponents are harder. Regardless of which mode you choose, there are chances for you to unlock characters and stages, as well as each rewards you with Z points, the in-game currency used to buy Pataras to power up your characters. A lot of these Pataras are returning from Tenkaichi 3, but there are quite a few new ones added, some very powerful ones. Though the game is balanced around having access to these items, as you will probably notice that the parallel quests are overall quite a bit more challenging than the Mission 100. Of course the classic modes, tournament, dueling and training are still present. They haven't seen major changes aside from the tournament mode, which now has a tournament of power instead of the Yamcha tournament. But if you're like me and love the randomness of the Yamcha tournament, you don't have to worry because now the big tournament will have you playing with a randomly selected fighter. The tournaments are still as fun as ever, and I honestly prefer Tenkaichi 4's selection over 3's, but I really wish they could have made it so you could select the difficulty and the tournament you want to enter at any time. Given my little knowledge of modding, I'm not even sure if this would even be possible to change, so it may just be an unreasonable request, but if they could change it, I think it would make it better. All in all, the Time Nest offers a solid mix of modes. Whether you prefer survival challenges, structured quests, or ranking up through intense battles, the variety keeps things interesting and gives you a lot to do after tackling the story mode. Tenkaichi 4 has a very old school mentality when it comes to content. There are no online battles for the game to fall back on, so it is stacked with a lot to do and there is a lot of fun to be had if you enjoy the gameplay loop, as none of these modes stray far from what the core of the game is. At the end of the day, Tenkaichi 4 is Tenkaichi 3, but more of it, which is both a blessing and a curse, but it's ultimately up for you to decide which it is.